Well, that's just about it for March. I have 4 or 5 hours left to work this month on the extremely large head. So here's a quick progress report. I'm starting to understand better the whole question of support and suspension so that I can actually get around to working on him. And that sort of procedural, technical element is important. When you go to art school, it's not just about deep ideas, it's about, I suppose, how to prime a canvas. I remember listening to one contemporary artist talking about the lessons they learnt at the Royal Academy. And they were saying how part of it, was obviously the exposure to incredible art and incredible teachers, but another part was stretching the canvas and getting ready to work and learning how to mix paint and all those sort of things. If you're learning to cook, it's not just great flavors, it's knife skills. So that's a long way around saying that working out how to suspend a large piece, support the internal structure easily, and do so in a way that it can be quickly moved to a new position when you've finished working on the area that you've had access to, is obviously a part of my learning curve, and I'm having to figure it out for myself. So that's been a success. Now, looking at him here in this position, you can see that the hair curls on the back of his head and the neck are a little squashed. Not a problem, because when I move him up, if it squashes easily, it can be unsquashed equally easily. One thing I realize definitely is that to make him more self-supporting, I would need to, for example, fill in the ends where the trapezius sort of curves round and meets the clavicle. But if I did that, if I filled in the bottom of this head, the final result would be much, much stronger, but it would change the reading. The reading of the piece would go from being a sort of, if you think about it in metaphorical terms, like a silicon mask that you cast on top of something and then peel off. This is a sort of wire mesh that is the skin, so to speak. If I fill in those ends, it becomes, rather than something I've peeled off, something I've cut out, which becomes a much more violent action. And certain art theoreticians have spoken about this, how the traditional bust is an incredibly violent image and sort of connects more to the head of the enemies stuck on top of a stake on the city limits than it does to any sort of homage. And I don't want to do that, not at all. It does mean, this sort of squashing process, that it's slightly hard to judge whether I've got the angle of this hair on the top right. I will only find out when I raise the head some more and complete the head. What about the time of all of this? Well, I've got this top front part of the head sort of blocked in, but if I look, for example, over here, you can see that there are still big gaps, and they take some time to fill. So that's going to be what I'm going to do the next couple of days. And then I will raise him up and sort of move down to this empty area here. So I'll sort of raise him up 40, 50 centimeters and go from there. I think I will be in a position to suspend him as he will be shown pretty much at the end of April, at which point I will lift him up and get him to a height where I can work on neatening up the neck and the back of the sort of tail end of his hair. But it's going very well. I'm encouraged, and I sort of look at it and think, well, yes, this is a good way to spend 6 months of my time. Of course, for the time being, I'm producing an object with no real destination. It's difficult to move, requires an enormous amount of space. So showing him to a wider public is difficult, and based on my place in the marketplace, selling him it will be very, very difficult. So he will hang in the gallery and keep me company. Rita and I will be very, very happy to welcome a guest. And in the long run, if someone asks me, sort of, do you have a kind of game plan, a vision of where this is all going? You know, if I was being really, really honest, and why not, I enjoy making these very large pieces, and if they just all end up staying here, sort of gathering dust and housing small colonies of spiders, which is the case at present, that's fine. The idea, the long-term vision, is that eventually people will, come to the gallery. It will be a draw, whatever that might mean, and however long that might take. On one of my various trips with my parents, when I'd go back to South Africa, we were driving back from Johannesburg to Port Elizabeth, and we passed through the Karoo and stopped by at Helen Martin's Owl House in New Bethesda. And she was a bit of a recluse, and she spent a long time making interesting sort of stained glass effects with crushed coloured bottles and biblical-themed concrete sculptures. She had one man who helped her, and in her lifetime, people thought she was, quite frankly, out of her mind and probably also depraved, because she was a respectable lady living a not particularly respectable and somewhat frowned upon sort of life. I'll leave it at that. And now, that's pretty much the only reason people will go to New Bethesda. Maybe that's the destiny of David here in my little corner of Brazil. Who knows? Anyway, that's it. Trust you're well, you're keeping safe, and your lives are filled with joy. And until next month, let's carry on making good choices and making great art. Ciao.